My name is Mia Adams. I'm 18 years old. And this is the story of how being left behind for a Hawaiian vacation shattered the last illusions I had about family, and how I rose from a forgotten afterthought to someone they would never again be able to ignore. The morning they left me behind, the sky outside was a cruel blue, a bright, mocking contrast to the hollow ache in my chest. I stood by the window of our small two-story house in Vermont, clutching the worn strap of my faded backpack, and watched as the taxi pulled away, carrying my parents and my twin sister Chloe to the airport. Off to paradise. Off to celebrate Chloe's high school graduation, and conveniently forgetting that I, too, had graduated that same day. My heart should have been numb by now. After 18 years of watching Chloe get everything, from the prettier birthday cakes to the better gifts to the attention, the pride, the love, I should have expected it. But no matter how many small slights, no matter how many times Mom told me, "You understand, don't you, Mia?" With that sickeningly sweet smile, it still stung. Like a fresh paper cut layered over an old, festering wound. I pressed my forehead against the cool glass and closed my eyes. It was supposed to be a celebration for both of us. Chloe and Mia, the Adams twins, graduating together. But somehow, like everything else in our lives, it had become Chloe's event, Chloe's moment, Chloe's reward. And me. I was the afterthought, the house sitter, the dog walker, the waitress who couldn't possibly need a break. That night, as I lay alone in my tiny room with its peeling wallpaper and the cheap single mattress, I let the tears come. I wasn't crying because they had gone to Hawaii without me. I was crying because, deep down, I had still dared to hope that maybe, just maybe, this time would be different. I woke up the next morning to silence. No clinking dishes. No laughter. No Chloe shouting for her curling iron or Mom chiding Dad to hurry up. Just the steady hum of the refrigerator and the sound of my own breathing. The house felt like a tomb, and I was the last soul left inside. I went through the motions. Got dressed. Ate a slice of dry toast. Went to my shift at the local cafe. The manager, a kind woman named Trish, took one look at me and pulled me into a back hug. "Rough morning, kid?" she asked softly. I just nodded. What was the point of explaining? Who would even believe it, that a family could so neatly discard their daughter like an old shoe they forgot to throw out? After my shift ended, I didn't want to go back to the empty house. My heart led me somewhere else, to the tiny white house with a green picket fence on the far side of town. The one that belonged to William and June Carter, my grandparents, the ones my mother had erased from our lives as if they never existed. I stood outside their home, the evening sun casting long golden shadows across the garden of wild daisies. I hadn't seen them in years. I had only learned the truth that they were still alive, a few months ago, after stumbling on an old photo album hidden behind the family bookshelf. A secret my mother had tried to bury. I swallowed my nerves and knocked. The door creaked open, and June Carter's lined face appeared, her blue eyes widening in shock before filling with tears. Without hesitation, she opened the door wider and pulled me into a fierce hug. "My sweet girl," she whispered into my hair. "Welcome home." Inside, everything smelled like cinnamon and lavender. Cozy. Real. A place where love didn't have to be earned. Over warm apple pie and tea, I told them everything. About the years of second-hand clothes, the forgotten birthdays, the invisible existence I had endured. About the graduation ceremony where Mom and Dad had cheered like maniacs for Chloe and barely looked at me. About the vacation they had left me behind to take. Grandpa William sat quietly, his big hands folded on the table, his weathered face dark with anger. "You deserved so much better," he said finally, his voice thick. And then June smiled, a small secret smile, and reached under the table. She handed me a small wrapped box. Inside was a set of car keys. I blinked. "What is this?" Grandpa chuckled, the sound warm and rich like a deep drumbeat. "That, my dear, is your graduation gift." Still in shock, I let them guide me outside to the driveway, where parked under the fading sun was a gleaming silver Lexus. Shiny. Beautiful. Nothing like the used junkers I had grown used to dreaming about. But I don't. I stammered, tears filling my eyes. "We saved for this," June said firmly. For you. When your mother turned her back on us, we didn't stop loving. We just waited for the day you'd find your way back. I sank onto the front steps, clutching the keys to my chest, my whole body trembling. For the first time in 18 years, someone had chosen me. Not because they had to. Not because it was convenient. But simply because they loved me. That night I stayed at their house. We ate grilled cheese sandwiches and played old board games. I laughed more in that one evening than I had in the past 5 years combined. I fell asleep in a guest room surrounded by the soft scent of clean sheets and homemade cookies, knowing that for once, I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Tomorrow would be different. Tomorrow, when they came back from Hawaii, expecting me to be sitting obediently in their cold, empty house, they would find something they could never have predicted. I smiled into the dark, the car keys cool and solid in my palm. Tomorrow, the forgotten daughter would finally be unforgettable. The next morning, the sun beat hot against the white picket fence as I sat on the porch swing, a tall glass of iced tea sweating in my hand, waiting. The silver Lexus gleamed in the driveway, catching the light with every sway of the breeze. It was parked perfectly in view of the street, impossible to miss. I had washed it that morning, taking my time polishing every curve and edge until it looked like something out of a commercial. It wasn't about showing off. It was about letting the truth, and my freedom, shine too brightly for them to ignore. The distant rumble of tires on gravel made my heart skip. I set down the glass and stood up, smoothing the front of my simple sundress. The taxi rounded the corner and pulled into the driveway with a slow, lazy turn. Out spilled Chloe first, dragging her oversized Gucci suitcase behind her. Her designer sunglasses perched on top of her messy bun. She was sunburnt and looked irritable, like Hawaii hadn't lived up to her fantasies. Behind her, Mom and Dad emerged, both carrying the heavy fatigue of travel and something else. The stunned, confused expression of people seeing something they absolutely did not expect. Mom's hand flew to her mouth. Dad stopped dead, the handle of his suitcase slipping from his hand and crashing onto the ground. Chloe, halfway through a dramatic sigh, caught sight of the Lexus and froze. What is that? Mom gasped, her voice high and shrill. I leaned casually against the porch column, the keys twirling slowly around my finger. I could see it in their eyes, the recognition, the jealousy, the greed. Welcome home, I said, my voice calm, almost cheerful. Did you have a nice trip? Chloe pulled off her sunglasses with a dramatic sweep. Mia, what is that car? Where did it come from? I shrugged, letting a small smile play at the corners of my mouth. Oh, this. I gestured toward the Lexus. It's my graduation gift. From Grandma June and Grandpa William. For a moment, there was absolute silence, as if the summer heat itself had sucked all the air out of the world. Then Mom's face crumpled into something grotesque, a mix of shock, outrage, and panicked calculation. They're alive, she choked out. Very much alive, I said smoothly. And doing very well, actually. Dad stumbled forward, staring at the car like he couldn't believe it was real. Chloe made a strange squeaking noise in her throat, her wide eyes darting between the car and me, like she was doing mental gymnastics trying to fit this new reality into her self-centered universe. Mom recovered first, stepping closer with a falsely sweet smile plastered on her face. Mia, honey, she cooed. You know Chloe needs a reliable car for college. Maybe it would be best if she used this one. I blinked at her slowly. You're asking me to give Chloe my car. Well, Dad cut in, his voice sharp and brittle. It's not like you need something this fancy. You have your little cafe job. Chloe's future is important. She needs to make a good impression. The audacity was almost amusing. Almost. I tilted my head, studying them like they were strange museum exhibits. These were the people who couldn't even remember to pack me a souvenir, who hadn't thought twice about leaving me behind while they drank Mai Tais on beaches I'd only seen on postcards. Now, faced with something they wanted, they were suddenly filled with concern for my needs. I laughed, a real, clear, cutting laugh that echoed across the yard. You want me, I said slowly, savoring every word, To hand over the first thing anyone has ever given me purely out of love. Just because it's convenient for you. Their faces hardened. Chloe crossed her arms over her chest and scowled. Stop being so selfish, Mia. You know you don't deserve that car. Something inside me, something that had been battered and bruised for 18 long years, snapped cleanly into place. No, I said, my voice like steel wrapped in silk. You don't get to decide what I deserve anymore. Dad's face turned an alarming shade of red. If you can't appreciate family, maybe you shouldn't live here. I wasn't planning to, I said, stepping off the porch. I popped open the Lexus's trunk to reveal 2 neatly packed suitcases. Gasp. Chloe muttered something under her breath that sounded suspiciously like a curse word. I've been planning to leave for months, I continued, slamming the trunk shut with finality. I'm not your house sitter. I'm not your backup plan. I'm not your punching bag. I moved to the driver's side, my heart hammering in my chest. But this time it wasn't fear. It was exhilaration. And one more thing, I said, smiling brightly. I got accepted to Columbia University. Full scholarship. I'm moving to New York next week. If I had thrown a grenade into the driveway, it wouldn't have been more devastating. Mom swayed where she stood, clutching her chest like she was about to faint. Chloe let out a strangled sob. Dad opened his mouth to argue, but no words came out. I slid into the driver's seat and started the engine. The Lexus purred to life, rich and powerful and mine. As I backed down the driveway, I lowered the window and leaned out one last time. Have a wonderful summer, I said sweetly. Maybe you can send me a postcard this time. Then I drove away, leaving behind nothing but the dust from the road and the stunned, regretful faces of the family who had only ever seen me as disposable. For the first time in my life, I wasn't chasing after them. I was chasing my own future. The road stretched out before me like a ribbon of possibilities, the late afternoon sun casting everything in hues of gold and amber. As I drove away from the house that had been a cage for 18 years, I could feel the weight lifting from my shoulders with every passing mile. I wasn't just leaving behind walls and a roof. I was leaving behind every whispered slight, every look of disappointment, every feeling of not being enough. The Lexus glided smoothly along the backroads toward the small white house at the edge of town. My real home now. William and June were waiting for me on the porch when I arrived, just as they had been that first night. Grandpa waved a hand in the air as I pulled into the driveway, while Grandma clapped her hands together like a child seeing fireworks. I parked, stepped out of the car, and before I could say a word, June was hugging me fiercely. "Welcome home, sweetheart," she whispered against my hair. Inside, the house was filled with the comforting smells of roasted chicken, fresh bread, and warm apples, like love made tangible. The dinner table was already set, a little banner stretched across the fireplace mantel that read, "Congratulations, Mia." I laughed, a real laugh, and wiped tears from the corners of my eyes. That night, after we ate until our bellies were full and laughed until our sides hurt, we sat around the fireplace drinking tea. William leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "We've been talking," he said, glancing at June, who nodded encouragingly. "You're heading to New York soon, starting a whole new life. We want you to have a real place of your own." I blinked at him, confused. "I have a dorm at Columbia." He chuckled. "No, not a dorm. Real place. A little apartment. It's already rented, 10 minutes from campus." I stared at them, mouth open, my cup frozen halfway to my lips. "We know how much you've had to rely on yourself, Mia," June said softly. "You deserve a space where you feel safe. A place that's truly yours." My throat tightened, and for a long moment I couldn't speak. All I could do was nod, tears burning my eyes. They showed me the pictures later that night. A small but sunny apartment with hardwood floors, big windows, and a tiny balcony perfect for reading or growing flowers. It wasn't grand, it wasn't flashy, but it was mine. Over the next few weeks, life blurred into a flurry of preparations. We bought new bedsheets, a second-hand desk, a little coffee maker. Grandpa insisted on getting me a sturdy bike for getting around the city, while Grandma stocked me up on enough homemade cookies to last a small army. Meanwhile, my phone buzzed day after day with messages from my parents. Mia, stop being dramatic. Family is family. You're throwing away your future over a stupid argument. You'll regret this when you realize you can't survive without us. Each time I read the words, felt the brief sting, and then deleted them. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. They weren't reaching out because they missed me. They were reaching out because they realized they had lost control. The night before I left for New York, William and June sat with me under the starlit sky on the porch swing, sipping cocoa. You know, Grandpa said, watching a plane blink across the sky, strength isn't just about surviving bad times. It's about knowing when to let go of people who hurt you, even if they're family. I rested my head on his shoulder, feeling the deep, quiet truth of his words settle into my bones. I don't feel angry anymore, I said softly. Just free. June smiled and reached over to squeeze my hand. That's how you know you're ready. The next morning, we loaded up the Lexus and drove down the highway toward my new beginning. Columbia's campus rose up around me, beautiful and bustling with life. Students hurried across courtyards, clutching books and laughing into cell phones. The air buzzed with 1,000 dreams being built at once. After helping me unload my things, William and June stood in the doorway of my new apartment, beaming with pride. Grandpa fished into his pocket and handed me a little silver keychain, a delicate tree engraved with the word strength. You already have it, he said, pressing it into my hand. This is just so you never forget. I hugged them both tightly, feeling the warm weight of their love wrap around me like a blanket. When the door closed behind them, I sat down in the middle of the floor, surrounded by boxes and sunlight streaming through the windows. For the first time in my life I felt it, pure, unshakable joy. This wasn't just a new chapter. It was my first chapter, written by my own hand. My first few weeks at Columbia were a whirlwind of nerves, excitement, and quiet triumphs. I threw myself into my classes, determined not just to survive but to thrive. Every lecture hall, every seminar, every library stack felt like a different universe opening up to me. I made friends quickly. Not because I tried to be someone else, but because, for the first time, I wasn't afraid to just be me. There was Emma, a sociology major with a bright laugh who always wore mismatched earrings, and Daniel, a sharp-eyed economics major who had a gift for turning even the dullest subjects into lively debates. They never asked probing questions about my past. They didn't look at me like I was broken. They saw me as I was, a girl who had fought hard to be standing there. Late nights found us crammed into coffee shops, poring over textbooks and trading jokes over greasy fries. Mornings were spent rushing across campus with half-eaten bagels and cups of coffee balanced precariously in hand. My world was full, vibrant, and alive in ways I had never even dared to imagine before. At night, I would sit on the tiny balcony of my apartment, the city lights glittering like fallen stars all around me. I would run my fingers over the little silver tree keychain Grandpa had given me, the word strength pressed into the metal, and I would smile. For the first time in my life, I wasn't invisible. I wasn't just surviving. I was living. One chilly afternoon in late September, I was perched on my balcony with a novel when my phone buzzed. I glanced at it, expecting a text from Emma or Daniel. Instead, I froze. The name blinked on the screen like an unwelcome ghost. I let it ring until it stopped. Then the messages came pouring in. Mia, please. Let's talk. You can't just ignore us forever. Family sticks together. Blood is thicker than water. Your grandparents won't be around forever. What will you do then? The last one stung more than I wanted to admit. I knew William and June were aging. I knew every day with them was a gift. But what my mother didn't understand was that love, real love, wasn't a transaction or a weapon. And I would rather have 5 years with William and June than a lifetime of hollow, conditional affection from her. I set the phone down, my hands trembling slightly. I thought it would end there. But it didn't. The next day, as I was wiping down tables during my shift at the campus coffee shop, I caught movement outside the window. I straightened, my stomach dropping. Standing outside the window, looking almost out of place among the bustling students, were my parents. Mom, dressed in a bright red blazer that screamed for attention. Dad, arms crossed tightly, his mouth set in a grim line. And Chloe, tapping furiously at her phone, her expression sour and petulant. They stood there for a moment, scanning the cafe, their eyes locking onto me. I turned away instantly, pretending not to see them. I grabbed a tray and bustled behind the counter, heart pounding. They didn't come in. They didn't call out. They just stood there watching me. I knew exactly why they were here. Word had gotten back to them about the Lexus, about the apartment, about the scholarship. Maybe even about the internship I had just landed with a major nonprofit. Suddenly, I wasn't the forgotten daughter anymore. I was an asset, potential bragging point, and they wanted to claim me again. When my shift ended, they were gone. But when I got home, a letter was waiting for me, stuffed under my apartment door. It wasn't handwritten. It wasn't warm. It was a contract. A legal document drawn up offering a reconciliation agreement. They would welcome me back into the family if I agreed to certain terms. Terms that included sharing future financial gains and maintaining family appearances. I laughed out loud, a bitter, incredulous laugh that echoed through my tiny apartment. They hadn't changed. They hadn't understood. They thought love could be brokered, but negotiated. They thought I could be bought. I folded the document neatly, placed it back in the envelope, and tossed it into the trash. That night I called William and June. I told them everything. Grandpa chuckled, a deep rumble of amusement. Let them stew in their own greed, he said. You owe them nothing, Mia. Nothing. Grandma June's voice was softer but no less fierce. You are loved. You are already whole. You don't need them to complete you. I went to bed that night with their words wrapped around my heart like armor. The past might try to claw its way back in. But I wasn't that scared little girl anymore, begging for scraps of love. I was Mia Adams, and I was just getting started. As fall deepened, Columbia's campus transformed into a sea of gold and crimson. The crisp air buzzed with the energy of possibility, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I was exactly where I belonged. My days were packed from morning until night. Classes, study groups, volunteer projects, my part-time cafe job. But instead of feeling overwhelmed, I thrived. Every paper I wrote, every late night spent arguing about philosophy or economics over cheap coffee with Emma and Daniel, felt like bricks being laid into the foundation of a new life. A life I was building for myself. At the nonprofit where I landed my internship, an organization that helped underprivileged high school students navigate college applications, I found a cause that burned fiercely in my chest. I worked with students who reminded me so much of who I had been, overlooked, underestimated, fighting uphill battles in silence. One afternoon, after a particularly emotional session helping a young girl fill out her first ever scholarship application, I stepped outside and stood under the fading sun, breathing in the sharp, cool air. This was it. This was the life I had dreamed of while sitting alone at that battered dining table back home, ignored and invisible. A life of purpose. A life of my own choosing. Yet even as I built my future, shadows from the past tried to creep in. Mom's calls didn't stop, even after I blocked her number. She switched to emails, letters, even social media messages from fake accounts I easily spotted. First, the tone was sweet, apologetic. Mia, we miss you so much. Let's start fresh. Chloe feels terrible about everything. She wants to apologize. Come home for Thanksgiving. We'll make your favorite pie. When those failed, the messages turned bitter, sharp as knives. You're ungrateful. We did everything for you. You think you're too good for us now? Don't forget where you came from. I didn't answer a single one. But one cold Saturday morning, just as the first snow dusted the city streets, an envelope arrived at my apartment. Hand-delivered, not through the mail. Inside was a simple, printed invitation. Chloe Adams' grand 18th birthday bash. Hosted at the Four Seasons Hotel. Formal attire required. Family celebration. Scrawled in a familiar looping script at the bottom was a note. "We'd love for you to attend, Mia. It would mean so much to us all." I stared at it for a long moment, feeling the old ache press against my ribs. The girl who had once desperately wanted to be invited, to be included, would have clutched that card to her chest and cried from joy. But I wasn't that girl anymore. Still, a thought gnawed at the back of my mind. Maybe it was time. Not for reconciliation. Not for apologies. But to show them, clearly, undeniably, just how far I had come. I tucked the invitation into my desk drawer and smiled a little to myself. If they wanted a show, I would give them one. The night of Chloe's party, Manhattan glittered like a diamond under the winter sky. The Four Seasons was ablaze with light, its grand chandeliers casting golden pools over velvet carpets and crystal glasses. I stepped out of my Lexus in a deep emerald green dress that hugged my frame like it was stitched just for me. Simple. Elegant. Powerful. The valet blinked at me, then smiled broadly. "Welcome, miss." Inside, the ballroom was crowded with people I barely recognized. Old family friends, neighbors, social climbers clinging to any atoms they could find. Chloe was easy to spot, of course. She stood under a massive floral arch, wearing a shimmering silver gown that probably cost more than a semester's tuition. She held court like a queen, her voice shrill with excitement. When she spotted me across the room, her expression froze for half a second, a flash of something raw and furious before the practiced smile returned. She waved me over like I was some distant acquaintance she could barely recall. "Mia," she trilled, drawing the attention of half the room. "You made it. How sweet." I smiled, cool and unbothered. Wouldn't miss it for the world. Mom and Dad appeared almost instantly, descending on me like vultures. Mom was all fake warmth and air kisses. Dad's handshake was stiff, his eyes calculating. I saw it clearly now, clearer than ever before. To them, my value was measured in appearances, in achievements they could claim credit for. They didn't see me standing there. They saw an opportunity to polish their image. They led me around like a prize pony, introducing me to distant relatives, boasting about my successes, as if they had built them brick by brick. Our Mia, full scholarship to Columbia. Our Mia, working with underprivileged kids. We always knew she'd shine. I played along for a while, sipping sparkling water and smiling politely, feeling more detached with every passing minute. They didn't know me. They didn't want to know me. They wanted the glow of my achievements without ever acknowledging the years of darkness they had forced me to endure. Finally, when the speeches began, the grand declarations of Chloe's amazing future, I knew it was time. As Chloe preened in front of the microphone, basking in the applause, I quietly made my way to the center of the room, stepping up to the family table where Mom and Dad sat beaming like royalty. I placed a small, neat envelope in front of them. Inside were 3 documents, proof of the full title and ownership of the Lexus, in my name alone. A notarized statement from my grandparents, legally disinheriting my mother from any claim to their assets. My official acceptance letter to a prestigious fellowship program I had just won, one that included a hefty stipend, travel abroad, and public recognition far beyond anything Chloe or my parents could ever manufacture. Mom opened the envelope with trembling fingers. As she read, her face turned first white, then red. Dad cursed under his breath. Chloe, noticing the disruption, turned from the microphone, her eyes narrowing. I leaned in slightly, my voice low and even. "I don't belong to you," I said. "I never did. You don't get to use me. You don't get to touch what I've built." And then, before they could sputter a response, I turned, my heels clicking smartly across the marble floor. I walked out of the ballroom without looking back. As the grand chandelier lights faded behind me, the cold winter air embraced me like an old friend. I had arrived alone. I was leaving stronger. And this time, it was their turn to watch me walk away. The cold Manhattan night wrapped around me like a comforting cloak as I stepped into my Lexus and pulled away from the Four Seasons, leaving behind the glittering ballroom, the hollow applause, and the crumbling facade of the family that had never truly been mine. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I didn't second-guess myself. Instead, a deep calm settled over me, the kind that only comes when you've finally set something down after carrying it far too long. The city whirred past my windows, bright and indifferent. I let it all blur together, my mind quiet for the first time in what felt like years. No more wondering if I should have tried harder. No more hoping they would change. No more mourning a family that had never truly seen me. I had made my choice, and it was the right one. When I got back to my apartment, the little place felt warmer somehow, cozier, as if it too knew that a final battle had been won. I peeled off the emerald dress, folded it carefully, and pulled on my favorite old hoodie, the one June had embroidered my name onto last Christmas. I sat cross-legged on my bed, phone in hand, and dialed the only people who mattered. William answered on the second ring. "Sweetheart," he said, his voice breaking into a relieved laugh. "We've been thinking about you all evening." I smiled, feeling my chest swell with love. "It's done, Grandpa. I went to the party. I made sure they know they can't touch me. Then I walked away." There was a pause on the other end, and then June's voice piped in, warm and proud. "Good. Good, my sweet girl. We're so proud of you." I pressed the phone tighter against my ear, letting their voices wash over me. "Can I come visit tomorrow?" "Yes." "You better," Grandpa chuckled. "We're making pancakes." I laughed, real and free, before we said our goodnights. That night, I slept deeply, dreamlessly, wrapped in a cocoon of peace. The next morning, the city was dusted with a fresh layer of snow. It made everything look new, unspoiled, like a blank page waiting for my story to be written. I packed a small bag, slipped into jeans and boots, and hit the road, the Lexus humming steadily beneath me. As I crossed the bridge out of the city and back toward the little town where William and June lived, my heart pounded with anticipation. When I pulled into their driveway, the little white house looked just as it had the first day I found it. Warm, inviting, brimming with unconditional love. They were both waiting on the porch, bundled up in thick sweaters, waving as I parked. I barely got the car into park before I was running up the steps and into their arms. Grandma June kissed my forehead, holding my face between her soft hands like it was the most precious thing she had ever seen. Grandpa pulled me into a bear hug, laughing in that way that made his whole chest shake. "Home," I whispered against his sweater. "I'm home." Inside, the house smelled like maple syrup and fresh coffee. A fire crackled merrily in the hearth. On the dining table sat a stack of pancakes nearly as tall as me, dripping with butter and berries. We ate until we were full, laughing over stories from their younger years. Stories Mom had never bothered to tell me. Stories about where I came from, not the polished, manicured version my mother had curated, but the real roots. Hard-working, kind-hearted, stubborn souls who had built something out of nothing with their own bare hands. After breakfast, we sat in the cozy living room, snow falling gently outside the windows. Grandpa reached over and handed me a small wooden box. It was old, the corners worn smooth with time. "What's this?" "Yes. Something we've been saving for the right moment," June said, her eyes shining. I opened the box carefully. Inside, nestled in soft velvet, was a delicate gold locket. I lifted it gently. Inside were two tiny photos, one of William and June on their wedding day, and one of me as a baby, cradled in June's arms. I stared at it, throat tightening unbearably. "I found this picture," June said, her voice catching. "When you were born, we were there, Mia. Your mother let us hold you just once before she decided we weren't good enough anymore." I traced the edges of the tiny photo with my finger. "You were loved from the very beginning," William said softly. "No matter what she tried to make you believe." Tears spilled over, hot and unstoppable. I clutched the locket to my chest and sobbed, not the broken, lonely sobs of a girl abandoned, but the cathartic release of someone finally hearing the truth she had been starved of her whole life. I was loved. I had always been loved, even when I couldn't see it. When the tears finally dried, I sat back, exhausted but lighter, like someone who had finally dropped a heavy, rusted chain they'd carried too long. Grandma June squeezed my hand. It's time for you to start living, Mia. Truly living. Not just surviving. I will, I promised, my voice fierce and certain. I swear I will. And I meant it. Because from now on, I wasn't going to waste a single second chasing people who couldn't see my worth. I would build a life so rich, so full, so bright that it would outshine every shadow they had ever cast over me. I would live. Not for them. For me. Spring bloomed slowly across the city, and with it, so did my life. My days were filled with more than just lectures and study sessions. They were filled with purpose. With meaning. At the nonprofit, I took on more responsibility, leading workshops for students who, like me once, had been told by the world to dream smaller, want less, expect nothing. Each time I saw a student's face light up with hope, each time I helped them see a future they hadn't dared imagine, I felt something inside me heal a little more. It wasn't just about success anymore. It was about building something bigger than myself. Back in my cozy apartment, framed pictures lined my bookshelf, not of the family who had once shunned me, but of my real family, William and June. My true roots, smiling, laughing, proud. Every weekend I could spare, I drove the Lexus back to their little white house, where the daisies were blooming again and the smell of apple pie clung to the curtains. Those visits were my anchor, reminders of where I came from and how far I had come. One Saturday afternoon, as we sat under the old oak tree in the backyard, Grandpa handed me a worn envelope. Inside was a check. A sum so large my breath caught in my throat. "Grandpa, Grandma, what is this?" I stammered. June smiled, brushing a stray gray hair from her forehead. "Our savings, sweetheart. We invested well over the years. And it's yours now." I shook my head fiercely, tears brimming. "I can't take this. I don't need." William placed a firm hand over mine. "It's not about need, Mia. It's about what's right. About passing down love, security, freedom. Things that should have always been yours." I cried openly then, holding that envelope not because of the money inside, but because of what it represented. Belief, trust, love without strings. I used a portion of it to fund my dream, creating a scholarship at Columbia for first-generation college students like me. I named it after them. The Carter Foundation for New Beginnings. The rest I tucked safely away, a foundation for whatever adventures lay ahead. Meanwhile, word traveled back to me through old acquaintances. My parents' attempts to save face had crumbled spectacularly. Without me as a convenient badge of success to wave around, their social standing dwindled. Chloe struggled in college, blaming everyone but herself. Their carefully curated image fractured under the weight of their own hollowness. But I didn't feel anger anymore. Felt nothing. They were chapters closed long ago. And I had an entire novel left to write. 2 years later, I stood on a brightly lit stage at Columbia's graduation ceremony, wearing a deep blue robe embroidered with honors cords. The president of the university handed me my degree with a warm smile, and I stepped to the microphone, heart pounding. My speech wasn't about achievements. It wasn't about climbing ladders or gathering awards. It was about gratitude, about resilience, about the unseen battles so many of us fought just to stand there that day. I ended with a simple truth. Family isn't always where you're born. Sometimes it's where you're truly seen, truly loved, and never asked to shrink to fit someone else's small world. As I stepped down from the podium, the auditorium erupted in applause. In the front row, standing and clapping the loudest, were William and June. Grandpa wiped at his eyes openly, unashamed. Grandma's smile lit up the room more brightly than any chandelier. After the ceremony, they wrapped me in hugs that made the rest of the world disappear. "You did it, sweetheart," June whispered, kissing my forehead. "No," I said, holding them tight. "We did it." That summer, I moved into a sunlit loft downtown, accepted a full-time position with a nonprofit, and began laying the bricks for a future that was mine, all mine. Daniel and I grew closer too. Slow, steady, real. No rush, no pressure, just two people learning how to dream together. He never asked me to explain the scars on my heart. He just held my hand and walked beside me as I built something new. Every night before I fell asleep, I touched the little gold locket hanging around my neck, a quiet promise to the girl I had been, and to the woman I was becoming. I had once thought that being left behind was the end of my story. But it wasn't. It was only the beginning. The beginning of a life not built from someone else's expectations, but from my own hopes, my own love, my own fierce determination. A life where I was no longer invisible. A life where I was enough, always had been, always would be. And no one could ever take that away from me again. Mia's journey reminds us all that sometimes, the family you are born into isn't the family you belong to, and that real love is never earned through suffering. It's given freely, fiercely, without conditions. Sometimes walking away isn't weakness. It's the strongest thing you'll ever do. If Mia's story moved you, share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget, at Revenge Echoes we bring you true stories of justice, resilience, and the power of reclaiming your own destiny. Subscribe for more powerful journeys like this one. Your voice, your story, your comeback, they all deserve to be heard.